Hello and welcome to Justice. I'm Judge Janine Pirro. Thanks for being with us tonight. Now to my open. It's real simple. You don't like America? You want to cheer as the World Trade Center comes down? You want to meet with a known suicide bomber? Okay, then you've given up your rights at the altar of American freedom. If there's a terror investigation on any level, you lose your right to fly, your right to buy a gun, and your right to privacy. Any rights you had take a back seat to our national security. If you're on a no-fly list, a terror watch list, if you're under terror investigation, you have no Second Amendment rights. You cannot buy a gun. You cannot fly on a plane, period. We can't allow you to do this to us again, and we will not allow you to use our Constitution as a shield while you put our loved ones, our neighbors, and our nation in danger or worse. All right, folks, our government is simply not doing enough with the information that it has. Federal agencies don't always share information with local law enforcement unless there's a joint terrorist task force. And even then, agency competition and all that goes with it hurts the investigations. Laws must be changed. We saw it when the FBI investigated the Boston bombers and were too blind to connect the dots where Homeland Security simply allowed Tamerlan Tsarnaev to fly back and forth to Chechnya. That same FBI interviewed Mateen, the Orlando shooter, 3 times. Mateen told them that his anti-American comments were simply a response to what he perceived as anti-Muslim comments. He was turning the tables on us folks while basically tapping into our politically correct Islamophobic guilt. Part of the reason for closing his case was that Mateen was a security guard, so he must be okay. Seriously? I've always been a fan of Jim Comey's. You know that. But I couldn't believe it when I heard this one.
I don't see anything in reviewing our work that our agents should have done differently.
I don't want to hear there's nothing the FBI could have done differently, especially when you keep telling us there are more terror attacks coming. You just sit back and say, we couldn't stop it? Jim, come up with some ideas, like matching a no-fly list, a terror watch list, with the purchase of a gun. How tough is that? We don't want to hear this nonsense that to do so might alert a terrorist and harm an investigation. Hell, the FBI visited Mateen 3 times. You don't think he knew he was being watched? And pray tell, why does the FBI even remove people from a terror watch list? If there's no probable cause to make a criminal case, then don't arrest the guy. But don't use our freedoms as a rationalization to free people up who want to kill us and take them off the list. So you don't have probable cause to charge them with a crime. So that doesn't mean you can't keep them on a watch list based on reasonable suspicion, a lesser standard of proof. Hell, the NSA's got all our metadata, and they know everything about the rest of us. Why can't you have a list? And from what I hear, most people who should be off the list can't get off it. And you want to take this guy off yourself? You're not locking him up. You're not convicting them of a crime. You're not jailing them. You're simply stopping them from buying a gun. And what's with this nonsense that words like Sharia and jihad are scrubbed from the FBI's lexicon and intelligence reports? You guys are so hogtied and so wimped out, you don't have the ability to even think logically anymore. Jim, you're the head of the FBI. It is not impossible. Jim, you are J. Edgar Hoover. You know how to make them pass a law. And if a judge wants to let them fly somewhere, then you know what? Make them pay for a U.S. Marshal to accompany them. Search them, and then search them again. Do a colonic if you have to. And for the rest of us, I've told you this before. I told you this after San Bernardino. Take a look. Get a gun. Buy one legally, learn how to shoot it, and be primed to use it. And I don't care if you get a long gun, a handgun, a revolver, a semi-automatic, get whatever gun you can handle. And don't let anyone talk you out of it. The Second Amendment to the Constitution and the United States Supreme Court confirm your right to have one. I'm telling you this again. Get a gun. Because this government ain't in a position to help. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter, hashtag Judge Jeanine. Joining me now by phone, former Assistant Director of the FBI and my friend James Kallstrom. All right, Jim, let's talk about Jim Comey. All right, we're both big fans of him, both work with him, both love him. All right. You want to tell me why Jim Comey was against this allowing them to buy a gun when, or was in favor of allowing them to buy a gun for fear that it would blow up the investigation? What is he thinking?
You know, I don't know. It's hard to explain some of this. All I can tell you is that I've been contacted recently by a great number of agents that are working this stuff right now, and they tell me that this politically correct blanket is getting heavier and heavier and heavier, that I wouldn't recognize the Attorney General guidelines anymore, and that really the Muslims have been sort of corralled off as special privileges where the FBI really can't go there, can't do things.
Okay, let me ask you this.
The reason that was closed is that's what the guidelines probably say.
What guidelines? Let me ask you this, Jim. I keep hearing about people on a terror watch list or the no-fly list. And, Jim, do you know what the difference is? Because I can't figure it out.
But just on a prior point, and I'll get to that, the Attorney General guidelines, Judge, those are really the guidelines that find their way down to the FBI and how the modus operandi and how things work. The no-fly list is a real mess. It always was. It was a mess when I was in. And there's all kinds of people on there that shouldn't be on there. There's all kinds of people on there with no rationale for being on there. Once you get on there, you can't get off. There's legend about people having their divorced wives put on there. I mean, all crazy stuff. Teddy Kennedy was on there. There was a 2-year-old baby on there, and it's a big problem. It's a mess, and that's why people don't want to have that as any kind of a barometer.
Jim, so then why would Comey drop this guy from whatever list he was on, and then he comes out and says, well, we don't want to stop them from buying a gun either. And of course, the White House, typical in the Comey White House, apparently bad blood, as I sense it, and I've said it before, comes out and says, oh yeah, we shouldn't allow them to buy a gun. It's no excuse that you've got a terror investigation going on.
Well, I don't know. That whole thing sounds crazy to me. And, it's probably the terrorist watch list the FBI maintains that they were taking off of. And I'll guarantee you that's because of this AG guidelines and how these things work. And, the agents can't lean forward very much, Jeanine, in this politically correct world we're in.
Well, why would they remove words like Sharia and jihad?
Because they're fixated on this issue we just spoke about. They're fixated, and I don't know why. I mean, we've got a fifth column in the government. We've got a fifth column in the news media. We've got a fifth column on the college campuses, the professors. I mean, we got real problems, Jeanine.
Well, I know we do. And the thing that bothers me, Jim, is this whole idea of you've got the no-fly list, then you've got known and suspected terrorists, and that's a group that's apparently on some terror screening database, and last estimate is 1.1 million people.
Oh, I could be wrong, but I don't think that's the terrorist watch list. I think the no-fly list we're probably mixing up the two. The no-fly list is a big problem. I think there's a lot more control over the terrorist watch list.
All right. So, Jim, what should happen now? Is this about terrorism? Is this about guns? Is this about the FBI, not being able to connect the dots? What is going on?
It's a combination of all these things. I mean, the Democrats go immediately to guns because they don't want to talk about the things we just talked about. They don't want to talk about radical fundamentalist Islamic terrorists. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the fact the immigrants are coming to the country. We don't have a clue who any of them are. They don't want to talk about the wide open border.
What's interesting, Jim, real fast. What's interesting is everybody wants a background check on anyone who wants to buy a gun, but we don't have the ability to do background checks on the Syrian refugees who are coming in. Jim Comey himself says we have no database, we can't do anything, and we can query them till the cows come home. So
right. I know.
we can't vet the refugees, but we have to vet the Americans buying guns. And by the way, my open makes it clear some of these people should not be able to get guns, and I'm a big Second Amendment person. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Sharia, as you well know, is not consistent with our Constitution.
Oh, of course not. Jim Kallstrom, thanks so much for being with us. All
Thank
right.
you,
According to new reports, federal authorities have received surveillance video from inside the Pulse nightclub that shows shooter Omar Mateen firing his assault rifle, as they call it, and systematically killing his innocent victims. Joining me now is Muslim scholar and author Dr. Kanta Ahmed. All right. Thanks for being with us tonight. Let me first put one issue aside, and that is, you got, as I understand it, there are 56 countries that have a Muslim majority. 37 ban homosexuality, 10 punish it by death. So, do we know if this guy is someone who is gay? Did we figure that out yet, or no?
I mean, we can only go based on how it's been reported in the media, but certainly his practices would indicate someone that had covert gay lifestyle of some kind. Perhaps he was exploring it. But I think certainly under all those environments you've described, he would be identified as gay.
Okay,
sure.
and so he knows that according to his religion and most countries that are majority, I mean, this is just wrong, period, end of the story. All right.
Categorically, it's a moral transgression in Islam to practice homosexual practices. There's no dispute about that anywhere.
Okay, let's now talk about Noor, the wife. First wife, we know he was beating her. She gets a divorce. Second wife, previously divorced, that he marries. I remember reading that she hadn't visited her family in years and only visited when her father died, only came to her father's funeral.
I noticed that too, and I thought that's remarkable, as she had a son who was about 3 years old, and why would she not be able to see the grandparents regularly to enjoy the male grandson?
But what does that tell you?
I think that she may well have been isolated or controlled by him, impecunious, not being able to buy her own plane ticket, not allowed, a controlled woman. Okay, so I've worked with battered women, I get it, are they controlled? But there's so much, doctor, that jumps out at me that it contradicts that. Number one, apparently he gave her access to bank accounts right before the shooting. He added her to his life insurance policy. She bought ammunition, or was with him when he bought ammunition. They were in contact during the fight, and she's texting him, "I love you, I tried to call you." And she drove him to the gay club, which was bizarre. I mean, the whole thing troubles me. In the last few days, these details would indicate she was aware of something developing. She was certainly aware of the changing financial circumstances in their marriage. Some reports have published that she was given lavish amounts of jewelry by her husband, who was not a high earner, immediately prior.
What does that tell you? Where would he be getting that money?
It's really, I don't know to what extent the jewelry was, how expensive it was, but it would be out of character. There was no occasion, and it surely should have been for some peculiar reason. Perhaps he knew he was saying goodbye. Perhaps this was a bribe to keep her quiet.
But if she knew this thing was going on at the time, we know that she did not call law enforcement and say, "My husband's in there." So isn't that enough? I mean, look, if the guy's in there, she's not under his control at that point.
I totally agree with that. And in fact, I would say if she had any knowledge of this, she should be arraigned and prosecuted to the most severe degree. Not only has she failed by the standards of being an American citizen, but she's utterly failed being a Muslim, which demands that you turn in even your parents, your husband, yourself, if you violate something that could endanger all of society.
Okay, and very quickly, you made a comment earlier about her ring.
Yes, I was troubled. I saw a picture of her in a car leaving in front of the press, and she was still wearing a fiery diamond ring, an engagement ring, which made me think, if one's husband had just committed mass murder, would you not want to destroy all symbols of your marriage to him? Mm-hmm. Maybe that was the expensive jewelry he'd bought her, but it was peculiar to notice.
All right, Dr. Kanta Ahmed, thanks so much for being with us. All right, Donald Trump slips in the polls. Lee Carter is here, and we'll take a closer look at the new numbers out this week. And next, I'm joined live by national spokesperson for the Donald Trump campaign, Katrina Pierson. Justice is back in a moment. The presumptive Republican nominee, Donald Trump, in Las Vegas and Phoenix today for big rallies. And while in Vegas, Trump doubled down on his call for a ban on Muslim immigration in the aftermath of the Orlando terror attack. With me now, Donald Trump campaign spokesperson Katrina Pierson. All right, good evening, Katrina. Donald met with the NRA once already. Is that correct?
He has, yes. There's going to be a subsequent meeting with the NRA to discuss these issues.
Okay, and where does Donald stand on this whole issue of, you know, the possibility of banning certain people from purchasing guns?
Look, Mr. Trump has been, you know, one of the first people out of the gate talking about being able to defend yourself in this world of terror that we live in. He talks about those in Paris and those even here at home. If they had been armed, these disasters could have been, the casualties could have been decreased significantly. Mr. Trump does not want to infringe on the Second Amendment. In fact, that's why he's working with the NRA to come up with a solution to this problem when you do have someone on the terror watch list that purchases a gun. But what we've seen, Judge, in San Bernardino, this individual went to a friend to get the gun for him. So what we do know is that terrorists, if they want a weapon, they'll get a weapon. So how do we move forward so that our government isn't failing, like in the case of Orlando, and keeping Americans safe?
Look, it's a good point. I mean, straw purchasers are the biggest problem out there. Someone who goes in and buys a gun for somebody else. But, you know, it's at the very least an extra step, and, you know, it might stop some people. If it stops anybody, it's fine. But, you know, we've got these, Donald has called for a temporary ban on Muslims until we know what's going on. So, when we've got someone who is on a terror watch list, Donald agrees that they should not be able to get a gun, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And in this case, you know, your opening was dead on. This is not an issue about guns. This is an issue about terrorism and our intelligence agencies, because we simply cannot have someone like this individual under investigation twice, with a father who had expressed love for terrorists and running for president in Afghanistan. So surely this individual should have never been removed from the list.
Yeah, but let me ask you this. I mean, right now, there are those people who say, look, you know, if he hadn't had that gun, he couldn't have killed so many people.
Well, we don't know that for sure. That's all in hindsight and in retrospect. Again, that's why we have gang members on the street right now with illegal weapons. It's not because they're legal. It's because they go out there and get what they want to do the destruction they set out to do. The question is, how do we make sure this happens when and putting due process in place, because that's what's missing today.
Well, you know what? I'm sure they could figure that out. This is not so difficult. All right, just in the last couple of weeks, Hillary Clinton, you know, general election, real clear politics average. She's 44, he's 38. How's he going to turn it around?
He's going to keep doing what he's doing. You know, this really isn't shocking to those of us in the campaign particularly, because we expected Hillary Clinton to get a little bump after she crossed her delegate threshold. And I think now moving forward, we're going to see more of a general election competition. We've already seen Mr. Trump out there talking about the Clinton-Obama policies of lackadaisical government involvement in terrorism at home. Look, if we can't have the FBI surveilling these people 24 hours a day because of resources, then why on earth are we giving Iran hundreds of billions of dollars? Okay. That money needs to stay home at the homeland.
All right, Katrina Pierson, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Great to be here. Good to see you, Judge.
After the filibuster in the Senate, a vote on gun control will happen this week. With me now, gun violence prevention advocate and former executive director of Everytown for Gun Safety, Mark Glaze. All right, good evening, Mark. Let's see if you and I can agree on something, and that is that there are certain people who shouldn't have a gun. How do we determine who those people are?
So one of the ways is pretty easy, and I think you and I might give the Trump campaign the same advice, and that's what campaign staffers are backing off of what the candidate has already said are usually in a bad position. Donald Trump has said terrorist suspects should not have access to guns, and Donald Trump has said Republican congressmen should not kowtow to the NRA. And that's why I think Donald Trump has a huge opportunity to say a guy who was under investigation for terrorism 3 times should not have access to a weapon of war, and his staff has just tried to backtrack that, and I think it's really reprehensible.
What do you say to the Second Amendment, the strict constructionalists who basically say, look, Second Amendment says you can have a gun. It doesn't limit the size of the gun or limit the size of the clip. In fact, the reason you have a gun is, to protect yourself from, a government that's out of control.
Yeah, well, in this case, I would ally myself with Antonin Scalia, who was a gun lover but also was no fool, who said in the decision that he wrote in Heller, there is an individual right to own a gun in the home for self-defense, but that right is not unlimited, and the government can impose limits when you need to do so to protect public safety. And if there is any instance in which public safety is compromised, it's when you have a guy who has been investigated by the FBI 3 times, was once on a terror watch list, or possibly twice, and nevertheless, we refused to pass the legislation that would have allowed the government to stop him from buying that gun.
But you know what's interesting, Mark? What's interesting to me is that the head of the FBI said, you know what, we should let him buy a gun because we don't want him to know we're investigating him. And then the Attorney General comes out and says, wrong, they overrule him on the gun sales debate. But let's put that aside for a moment. Okay. If you've got someone who has a mental problem, all right, and you know what? I prosecuted murder cases, for decades. And here's the bottom line. I'm tired of people saying, they're crazy, they're just evil. But if someone's got a mental problem because of HIPAA, how do you do a background check on them? The government doesn't let us. I used to sign these permits.
Well, it's a fair point. And look, the federal government has exercised its discretion to say to the states, look, if you have a HIPAA problem, get past the HIPAA problem if this person was so seriously mentally ill that they were actually adjudicated mentally ill, in which case, under federal law, they shouldn't have a gun. But let's talk about Comey for a minute. Look, you and I think, are both fans, but there are all kinds of political correctness in this world, and here's one. The gun lobby has made it so difficult to put somebody on a terror watch list that even when government officials know that somebody probably should be, they're reluctant to do it because they don't want to annoy the NRA.
It has nothing to do with putting someone on a terror watch list. The FBI does it. It's a database within the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Terrorist Screening Center of the FBI.
Yeah, but the gun lobby exerts such influence that they've made people afraid to put anybody on that list because they've created the straw argument that it's over-inclusive.
Mark, you know what? You make a lot of sense to me. You just lost it now 8 seconds ago. Okay,
it's a Saturday night, and I'm talking to a judge.
Mark, here's the bottom line, all right? Yeah. If you've got someone who is a danger, and I am a strong gun advocate, I mean, I believe in it. But you know what? We can't have people gunned down like this. And if we've got a government that is allowing them to buy guns or doesn't identify them as nut jobs, then shame on us. And shame on the government for not doing something.
No, we can absolutely agree on that. Look, on Monday, the government's going to vote on a couple of bills. One would require everyone to go through a background check when they buy a gun. The second would require that if the government has reasonable suspicion that you intend to commit terrorism with that gun, then there should at least be a pause on the sale. I think every American can agree that there are good things to do.
I got to go, but reasonable suspicion that they're going to buy a gun, is that what you said?
Reasonable suspicion that they're going to commit terrorism with that gun.
Yeah, well, you know what? They're dropping them off these lists anyway without probable cause. And so how are we going to even know who we should be suspicious of if they're not on the list because they've been dumped? Mark, I'm going to have you back. You make sense.
Thank you,
kind of, till about a minute ago.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am. My political panel is next. We'll finish talking about the gun debate and the presidential race in the wake of the Orlando terror attack. And later, part 2 of Street Justice on the road at a Trump rally in California. Stay with us. The Orlando terror attack is now pushing gun control and terrorism into the forefront of the presidential campaign. Both parties' presumptive nominees vowing to take on terror. Here with reaction, Chris Hahn, former senior aide to Democratic Senator Schumer, and chairman of the Republican political organization Go Pack, David Avella. All right, guys. I want to do a couple of topics here. Was this about guns or is it about terror?
I think it's about both, right? Terrorists being able to get guns.
Stop. David, is this about guns or is this about terror?
This is about terrorism, and the bigger question, Judge, is Americans want to know who's going to do something about this. And the reality is, with
if the Americans wait for the government to do it, they're in big trouble based on what we've seen.
Sure, but also, Judge, we are 140 days away from the election, and it requires a suspension of reality to think that Hillary Clinton, who allowed 4 Americans to die in Benghazi, is going to be the person to go after the terrorists to defeat them.
It's all about Benghazi to these guys.
Well,
you know, the fantasy island of Republican talking points,
Don't make me go to the facts of Benghazi, all right? Yeah. But here's the thing. You know, there are a lot of people who are saying now, based upon what happened, the horrific actions, that this guy should not have been able to get a gun.
Should not have been. Right.
Okay. Do you agree with that, David?
He shouldn't have, but look, 91% of people who are known or suspected to be on the terrorist list could pass a background check. A person who wants to do bad is going to do bad. That's why we have to protect our borders, and that's why we have to continue to take the fight to the terror network.
David, I want to talk about guns.
Or David Avella?
You stop talking. David, listen to me. David, look, should this guy have been able to buy a gun? Yes or no? Of course you're going to say
he shouldn't have, but how are you going to say? Judge, there are many ways for him to be able to get the gun.
Yes,
what we have to do is fight terror networks to make him not want to be in a terror network.
Okay. What'd you just say?
Look, the challenge is you've got to get people not wanting to go into terror networks, which he clearly was a part of. This fight is a fight against terrorism.
He's spinning.
Okay, all right. It's a fight against terrorism. Let's talk about guns. I think it's about terrorism. I think it's about jihad, and I'm so fed up with this government just interviewing these people and saying, oh, God, you know what? He only said that because we're Islamophobes, so cut him loose.
There are sensible things that can be done to allow law-abiding people to buy guns in America and keep people like this terrorist off the market for guns. And there have been proposal after proposal blocked by the NRA, blocked by people in the GOP, blocked by people who are in the pocket of the NRA. Why can't we have background checks?
He likes guns. Don't make it so black and white.
Well, you know what? Bernie supported background checks. So does
okay, let's not forget the generalizations. We want to save Americans now.
Absolutely.
All right. So what about the nut jobs who get a gun because the president, for all his talk, can't open up the HIPAA stuff?
We need a private sector solution to deal with HIPAA. That's why I believe private sector should take over gun background checks.
Should they take over the jails too?
They should do insurance on every gun. Let the NRA sell it. Let the NRA sell it.
David.
Look, the reality is the gun legislation that's going to come up Tuesday in Congress has already been up in December, and it failed. Both bills that came up in December failed, and there isn't the 60 votes to pass it this Tuesday. And even if it does, there's no indication the House is going to take it up, because and part of that is because Senator Feinstein's legislation wants to give all the control to the Attorney General.
You know what, David? I want to fight with him. It's not the NRA. It's the Second Amendment. And it's a slippery slope.
No. It's every amendment to the Constitution is subject to reasonable regulation put on by the government. Background checks is a reasonable
and you know what? If I want an AR-15, I should be able to have it.
You're a law-abiding citizen. You should be able to have whatever you want. But if you're a crazy terrorist or if you've got mental incapacities, you should not have it.
But Chris, it wouldn't have solved this problem. 91% of folks that are known or suspected terrorists on the list could pass a background check.
But if he's on the terrorist list, he should get it.
We don't even know who the hell they are.
Well, we have to be very careful. We have to make sure we put people on these lists and that the agencies are talking to themselves.
Let me ask you this, guys. What's going to happen when Congress does nothing Tuesday? David, what's going to happen?
Nothing's going to happen, Judge. It's going to be brought up and it's going to be defeated. They're on 60 votes.
It benefits.
I'm not asking you. Who does it benefit, David?
Look, the country is partisanly divided.
David,
Republicans are going to their corners and Democrats are going to their corners. The fight's going to be for independence.
The Democrats. Everything has been benefiting the Democrats for the last 2 weeks, and Donald Trump's meeting with religious leaders. He needs a miracle to get back in this race.
He's meeting with the NRA once, and he's meeting with them again.
Hey, if he gets it done, that's a miracle.
Next time, come to New York so I don't have to go back and forth like this. David Avella, Chris Hahn, thanks.
Nice seeing you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
All right, next, we analyze new polls out this week about the race for president and how Donald can get his groove back. Politics average poll for the general election matchup now shows Hillary Clinton with a 5-point lead over Donald Trump. But will the increased threat of terror facing America change everything? Here to break it down, political pollster, my friend Lee Carter. All right, Lee, we've got 44 versus 39. Donald took a hit over the last week or two. Why?
He has taken a big hit over the last 2 weeks, and I think there's two things contributing to that. One, Trump has made some serious missteps over the last few weeks, starting with his comments about the judge in the Trump University case, going on to his self-congratulatory email over after Orlando, and then even now going a little bit further where he's got this conspiracy theory that he's implying around Barack Obama, and people are starting to question whether or not they should give him the benefit of the doubt. He can come back from it. The second piece of it, though, is that Hillary Clinton is now pretty much seen as clinching the nomination on the Democrat side. Right. And usually when that happens, you see a bump. The thing that's most important to note here is her bump isn't as big as you would expect it to be. It's his decline that's really speaking to us right now. And he's had about a 5-point drop on average over the last 7 days.
Okay, so 5-point drop over 7 days is not good. But Donald has come back from some other slumps, has he not?
He absolutely has. When he was in Wisconsin, he was down at the same point that he is now, and it was a steep drop. It was about 3 weeks where he was really sinking, and everybody said, this is over. He was able to come back because he came back to New York, he came back strong, and he focused on the issues that matter most to Americans, and that's why he was so popular. Right now, he's got to get off of this defensive position that he's in and his heels about, like, did you mean to say this? What's going on? He's got to pivot back to the issues right now that matter most to Americans, which are the economy and national security. And right now, people really care about national security.
All right, so let's talk about national security. Let's assume that Tuesday nothing happens with all of these proposals for restrictions on gun sales. Who does it benefit if nothing happens?
You know, I'm not really sure who exactly is going to benefit from that. I think that it's going to seem like gridlock. It's going to really not speak well to the establishment if they can't get something done. But I do think that right now, on the Democrat side, this is a gun control issue. On the Republican side, almost 80%, or no, let me just make sure, 79% of Republicans believe that this was a terrorist issue, not a gun issue. And so if we can take this back, make it about gun control, I think it's really going to, I mean, not gun control, make it more about terrorism, more about national security.
Who does it benefit?
It benefits Trump.
All right, good. But let's talk about, wasn't there a difference in the polls between foreign policy versus security, that Trump's up on security, but she's up on foreign policy?
Yeah, and I think it's a really important distinction because most people will then argue that Hillary's going to be better on terrorism because she's better on foreign policy. But when people think about terrorism, they think about national security, and that's what benefits Trump. Hillary, on the other hand, has a better record on foreign policy, and what that means is people talking about diplomatic relations.
No, she has a record.
Not record. A better. I'm sorry. That she has better. She gets better polling numbers on foreign policy, and so people think that means more like diplomatic relations. It doesn't mean actually keeping us safe at home. It means she's going to go able and have better relationships with foreign leaders in their minds. Not necessarily saying what I think, but that's what the polling says. Okay, and real quickly, Lee, you know, with Bernie Sanders saying, you know, this is a movement and I'm still in it, you know, what do you think that does to the millennials? You know, I think it's going to be really interesting. I think the millennials are going to think that this is all about, you know, anti-establishment, taking government back, wanting people to fight for them. And so we know full well that right now 35% of millennials that are supporting Bernie Sanders said that they will go and support Donald Trump. If he's able to if Donald Trump can keep up his message, keep it as a movement, keep it as anti-establishment, he might well pull that kind of a number. I don't think it's going to be that large because we know that a lot of young people at the end of the day who haven't registered don't necessarily turn out. But if Trump can get them on his side, it could be.
Lee Carter, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Great.
Street Justice goes on the road next. Don't go away. Remember, a few weeks ago, I visited a Donald Trump rally in San Jose, California. We met so many people, we couldn't fit them all into one story. So here's more of what happened when I took street justice out west.
Why are you here tonight? I'm from Trump. I want America great again. That's why I'm here.
We think he is the last best hope for this country. And I have long said that I would support any loyal American over the scum that we have in Washington today.
So why are you here tonight?
I'm a Democrat, so I don't know.
You're a Democrat.
I'm supporting him because he's going to save our country, and he's going to get rid of the establishment and the government corruption that we have right now.
Why are you here tonight?
Well, the reason I'm here is because Trump stands for what I came here for 35 years ago, and I feel everything's going down the tubes.
How about you? Why are you here?
I love the whole synergy and energy that Trump created and generated.
I'm an immigrant. I'm coming from India, and I've done everything right, and I've tried for years and years together to get my family here. And the injustice that people like me feel when fence hopping, law-breaking people are awarded or rewarded with citizenship, when all the hardworking people like us are trying so hard to realize the American dream.
How do you feel about illegals who come here and don't go through what you went through?
I think that's horrible, to be honest with you. I think that's unfair to everybody, for those who really go through the process I went through, and for all American hardworking families in U.S. I think that's something that absolutely must be changed.
What about Hillary Clinton? What do you think of her?
Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt woman in this country.
I think she's like a puppet that has somebody writing all her speeches for her, and she just says what people are telling her to do.
What do you think of what Hillary Clinton said about him, that he was a loose cannon?
Well, I think that she is a loose cannon. I think that she is worse than any other loose cannons ever.
What do you think of the fact that Hillary said today he's a loose cannon and you can't let him near the nuclear button?
I have an open mind to things. She can say whatever she says, and
do you believe her? I mean, she's been around a while.
I have an open mind.
What about that video in Benghazi, Mr. Open Mind?
I listened what they said, and they're not being taken seriously by the media. Those three contractors that were in Benghazi. No one listens to them. They don't even get a chance to speak.
So what does that tell you?
That they're hiding the fact. They're not listening to these guys. These guys are.
Okay, so get to the point.
The election is still in November. I'm here because I have an open
You're
mind.
still Diego. Well, hopefully your mind will close before Election Day. Hillary Clinton says he's a loose cannon. Is he?
I don't think you accumulate the kind of success that he's had in sum total if you're a loose cannon. I think that the determination in terms of how he's going to be will be seen in the next several months. And I think that the presidential ethos that he's going to show it will come full circle.
We all know that this state has gone blue every election cycle since 1988.
Yeah.
And Donald Trump says he's going to try to put this in play. It's a bit of a heavy lift for him.
There you have it, John Roberts, the people you bump into at the Trump rallies. Say good night.
Yeah, good night. Good to see you, Judge.
We'll be right back.